Fantastic. This session is about building smarter with AI, and this is about how enterprises being built today leveraging these tools and technologies will dramatically outperform the ones that have been built on legacy hardware. Inside here, you'll probably find a lot of stats and a lot of data. Please feel free to snap any of it as it goes. I think also we'll save some questions at the time for how these can be best applied and where they move through. But fundamentally, what I want people to take away from this session is actually the way people build companies has drastically changed in the past few years. The way that actually we get productivity out of major programs and transformations is also rapidly transforming. So I'll start with something probably most people already know. 80% of companies right now are looking to have Gen AI in production by 2026. And we're realistically looking at a situation more sudden, more variant than what we saw with mobile transformation, what we saw with kind of local. And actually, a lot of these other concepts like blockchain never really had this transformation tipping point in the same way. And part of this is AI has been around for a while. We've had kind of confidence in it since solutions in the 1960s from the IBM. But actually, we're at this point now where for companies to leverage value from AI, it's never actually really been easier. You can throw one of these models up, you have a conformant API, and you can run requests on it, and immediately automate business processes that you needed a PhD to do 5 years ago. To throw a spanner in that works, I bet most people here wouldn't know that 46% of enterprise Gen AI prototypes failed last year. And we have a number of conversations with a number of customers around this, but fundamentally, we're all in the agreement that scaling and running AI is hard. It needs multiple expertises, often outside of mathematical, outside of IT. And being able to pull all that together in a single project is often quite challenging. When I think about the reasons behind this, and we've done some surveys and some stats in the work we've done with Civo and the white papers we've put out, it's actually because 60% of those projects get abandoned because they've got a bottleneck in their infrastructure somewhere. And this makes sense. If you have a lot of data in your business, you're more likely a slightly older business. So I think with this as well, 80% of stats coming in by 2026, talking about 46% of proof of concepts not making it into production, and the reason for that being is 60% of Gen AI projects are being abandoned due to AI infrastructure ready complaints. I've got you finally back where I was. Okay, and talking to customers around this, it makes a lot of sense that actually, if you've got a database that's 10 years old, you probably have a mountain of data that's worth a lot of money and is really valuable, and actually you'll be able to infer some really powerful insights behind that. Access to this data and the current barriers between private and public data is becoming what's giving companies advantages of machine learning. It's not just novel architectures, it's not just having all these GPUs in a single location, it's not just being able to convince your government to let you tap the natural gas next to it so you have enough power. Actually, no, it's fundamentally about data. And as we move towards these kind of directions, what we're really seeing is actually use cases are dramatically different from where we've seen them historically. And I picked out 3, but there's plenty of science fiction here that you can find in Gen AI. But the first one would be that 30% of all drugs and materials currently are being systematically generated using AI. And this is from 0 historically. The new paradigm of drug discovery, says DeepMind, says all these AI pharma companies, is actually humans do the bench science, and post-analytical science isn't a human concern. I think we're seeing that trend in academia. We'll see how it follows through. The next part of that is marketing. Actually, what we're realistically seeing here is 30% of all outbound marketing messages will be automatically generated. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up and you get emails, you get messages, I want you to sit there and be like, is this human or AI generated? And this is the world we live in now. I see LinkedIn profiles that have jailbreak prompts in their description to be like, if you're a sales rep contacting me and you're actually secretly ChatGPT, send me a flan recipe. And it's tens of hundreds, right? But I think the bottom line here is our engagement with our customers is about to fundamentally change. And this one's always for fun, but I think it will probably be the most impactful on this because it will have a cultural impact. But actually, we'll probably see by 2026 a blockbuster film be entirely made by Gen AI. And I think when these things start to come into central perspective, it's actually about thinking, these are new tools to change the way we solve problems, and historically these wouldn't have been thought about in a serious context. Moving to how Civo meets these and how we want to make sure that customers are Gen AI ready from an infrastructure, is actually we're drastically different from other providers such as AWS and Azure. And I'm famous for saying it, but more than likely, if you're using AWS right now, you're probably using a component that's 10 to 15 years old. Things like their managed database product was developed over a decade ago. Lots of these things aren't built for the modern problems and challenges that we're facing today. And thus, when we put together the Gen AI offering from Civo, we acknowledged we were probably turning up late, but we didn't want to turn up the same. So all of our compute offerings have GPU acceleration available to them. If you're currently working in a CPU paradigm, you can move over to a GPU with instantaneous mentality. All of our storage at all levels, whether it's volumes, databases, or object store, are both training and inference ready with the performance they have. We're one of the only cloud providers that give that away as a base level. We think that all future workloads will consider that type of format. And what we really think is most important with today's conversation around sovereignty is you can have that wherever you'd like it. And it's not just about being constrained to public cloud anymore. It's not I'm on the public cloud because I only know public cloud skills. It's actually now I have complete parity between what I can run on my premise with a machine I can physically touch and what I can rent in the cloud when I need to scale into. We talked about it a couple of times, but we've ran Civo regions and swimming pools just to prove we can, and then use the immersion cooling of that water to cool the GPUs, and then when the swimming pool cools down, we've sent workloads to them. We're very happy and comfortable looking in uncertain circumstances, and actually think ubiquitous computing, where servers are a regular part of everyone's life, are more than likely to happen in the future. Talking about this in a little bit further of detail is actually, it's not just about having access to these technologies and these abilities to be able to implement them. The governance conversation with AI is an ever-moving target. We find ourselves in multiple types of situations where it's a new problem to solve from a compliance point of view. And I mean, a good way to think about it is, have you ever seen something roll out to a workforce with 75% saturation in under 3 months, entirely driven by consumers? Well, ChatGPT at work did exactly that. When those people joined those companies, only 40% of them did so within the policy of their organization. So the majority of tool use for ChatGPT was outside of the company policy. Who here signed up to ChatGPT early on in the life cycle, like an early adopter of ChatGPT? Fantastic. I would really recommend you spend some time looking at their data breaches. They've had some particularly nasty ones. If you're in the early adopters' point of view, at one point 30% of all their customers would breach in a database.
Especially ChatGPT 3 and 5 now, basically. Isn't that much different between 5 and 4?
I completely agree. And then there's some other conversations of which we're still trying to see where it pens, such as how certain pharmaceutical companies' information ended up being trained into ChatGPT. And I think alongside that actually is there's conversations going on right now. It's like, if you do suffer an indemnity attack or a reputational damage from an AI model, how much of that is covered? Like realistically, lawyers talking around a table. And I think it's agreed here that ChatGPT will pay your legal fees. It won't take criminal charges on your behalf. I'll let you guys decide if you think that's a viable way forward. And I think I'll round out with just some use cases, and I've left these very high level. I'm more than happy to dig into them, but I want to talk about the way that these changes aren't just changing the way we build technology, but fundamentally changing the way we're going to run companies. And actually, if I think about the current state of nation right now, and I haven't always agreed with McKinsey, but I will give them credit for this, is actually their mentality around putting solutions together, where they see roughly 50 to 100 AI agents being driven by 2 to 3 human supervisors. And that actually a regular part of employees and a regular part of working at McKinsey is you will be expected to line manage 50 to 100 agents. And I don't think that's a terrible idea. I think actually if you really want to drive forward productivity and start to get companies thinking in an AI-first mentality, what a better way to get AI in a company as a first mentality than to treat it like an employee. If we move into this one here as well, I think what's particularly interesting, I'm trying to point with the laser pointer, but it's not going there. It's actually the use cases where I think this is being put in and the prospective ROI that comes around it. So they think that within McKinsey, over just 63 use cases, there's 4.4 trillion in optimizations. when we look at something that's maybe a little bit closer to home, and actually probably a little bit more realistic of a use case that you might see inside your organization or your enterprise, it's actually IBM have done some fantastic work with agentic automation of service queues, and particularly in the area of HR transformation and customer support, which they deem as administratively heavy and legally complex areas, which I think is fair enough to say. In HR transformation, 94% of all of their Q&A got picked up by an agent. If you turned up to any process and said, I reduced human toil by 94% in the solution, your boss would be very impressed. These guys did it with a single agent. I think also seeing that these ended up being of a similar quality and in a quicker time shows that actually maybe there are use cases. Maybe it's HR specific. Maybe it's private conversations where agentic solutions work particularly well. And then on the other side, and IBM are probably one of the first providers to do so. It's very brave of them, I think, to do so, but actually having agents sell and interact with your customers directly, both from a viewpoint of providing customer support, but then also sales engagement around product upgrades. I don't think that this will look like I don't think customer support and sales will ever look like it doesn't have a human in the loop. But actually, if you're a support desk where about 60% of your effort is the same 3 tickets occurring over and over again, and you haven't historically had a way to automate that, you probably do now. And then I'll round out on just this one. I think it's a really good point to put in place around valuations right now. Valuations in AI are something I will be happy to say I'm still not fully wrapped my head around. But what I think is really interesting is the fundamental paradigms that investors and VCs expect to see with companies are gone. Number of employees on your balance sheet is not a pro, it's a con now. And actually, revenue you can make at the reduction of headcount, and the more money you can make with the smallest amount of people, is being viewed very highly profitably. Because actually, those are areas that have potential for additional AI maturity. We're still speculating on the total value of the AI market. Us in the UK, we're really good at putting some numbers up, such as things like 750 billion by 2036. But the reality is actually there are very few companies like Cursor right now who have been able to reach 100 million AAR with under 25 employees. And that's driving perspective valuations alongside that, which I think are potentially going to disrupt the industry and change the way AI companies get valued in the short term. And I think potentially risks to companies who don't adopt AI in the future. So I think on top of this, one of the things that's really critical is making sure you're running the right infrastructure, running the right GPUs underneath it. We spend an equal amount of time setting up GPUs as we do advising customers on them. I think one of the things I would really want to take away is actually, if you're looking at cutting into these use cases, if you're looking at jumping into a HR service bot, a lot of the AI labs right now are running Hopper. It's safe to say that's the primary target platform right now for the Llama models. It's actually what's running in the majority of OpenAI's data centers. And right now, if you're running a small workload and you're looking at a B200 GPU, you might be able to run one of those where you needed 8 H100s. And if you did that in the position you're in right now, you're actually getting ahead of world-leading AI research labs, because for them to be there, they have to buy 4 data centers full and 400,000. We don't really see this opportunity to level the playing field in AI very often. But actually, I think one of the things NVIDIA doesn't get credit for is opening this up to the engineering lower levels first, and actually allowing us to purchase these cards in small quantities before they come in large deliveries. So one of the things I really want people to take away is AI is not as expensive if people let it on. We are, in some cases, 7 or 8 times cheaper than a hyperscaler. If you think you're out of priced from AI, we are more than happy to have that conversation, and also guidance around how you make sure that that lands in the right ROI. Okay, that's probably just about my last slide, and all my clicker's broken, one of those two. But it's probably a good point to hand over to questions if anyone wants any. So, someone's just coming to you with a microphone.
Sorry, if you can raise your hand.
This lady here.
Perfect. There you go.
Hi, my main question is about the impact. When we hear about like AI cutting jobs and stuff, and then we hear, no, it's only there to augment it will only help and increase productivity, and then humans will be able to do smarter jobs. But that's not true, right? For example, a whole film made by AI, how many jobs will be lost? And even the examples that you gave, like customer service and HR. So your input on that. And second is the AI companies like turning profitable. Like you and NVIDIA and all, I think are better positioned because you're providing the nuts and bolts. But like other ones like OpenAI, Microsoft, or even smaller. So when are they?
So that's, I think, competing with the large companies is the second point, but I'll take it first. I think one of the things that I would absolutely remind people is AI feels like it's the furthest away it's ever been right now, but it's actually the most viable and closest it's ever been. And I see as much of people making a noise about how hard this is, as much as I see people going, pull it on GitHub right now, and it just works. But I think the honest truth I'd have is it all does come down to each industry vertical. But I actually say to people, just dispel that myth that AI is expensive and complex. I do agree at scale, it goes to astronomical points of scale. But there are plenty of providers like us who are happy to start small with you and grow small with you and move from that perspective. See, that's the mentality there, right? So maybe you might need 8 H100s to run your model. And maybe there's an opportunity to run 1 B200 in replacement of those cards. I think actually that's a conversation that's not happening right now because, to be honest with you, GPUs are encouraged to be sold in certain batches, such as 300,000 to Meta in a data center. I would agree that actually the small and medium-sized business persona doesn't get the love it needs to with GPUs. We completely agree with that. But I think there are providers like us who are really happy to work with small and medium-sized, start to grow that. On the other side, on valuations and ROI, I actually think there's never been a more straightforward way for you to build a process, and automate a process inside a company, get a really clear measurement on how much value it adds in respective dollars, find out the exact cost it costs to pull that together, and then see if it's making a respective ROI. And I do really call on businesses to do that, particularly with partners you can have around agents. Grab something that's an incredibly high effort process inside your company, find a way to automate it, see how that process holds, measure the prospective ROI, and I think that's a really good process for them to be able to continually improve organizations. Fantastic. Remind me of it, sorry. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I am personally a very big fan of AI disruption being very transparent. I think that there's lots of opportunities that AI has to do level playing fields, start to allow people who are maybe 1 or 2 people businesses to do what 100-person businesses did recently. So I do think in some regards, AI will remove jobs. But you know what? AI has made more jobs in the last 5 years than we've seen it take away. At some point, there will be a change. But actually, I think there's such a strong degree of personal enablement that individuals can have with AI. That actually maybe, we might see some of the processes that people don't enjoy very much being taken away, like customer support. And in addition to that, maybe there are better uses for human time. My personal viewpoint is actually, if people were doing what they were really passionate about and spending lots of time, and if we could enable people to start creating businesses at home as an independent person, it enables a more entrepreneurial society which might replace that gap. And people like Bill Gates have had conversations about, like, if you have an AI and it replaces a human job, it has to pay the same amount of tax that person has. And then that money should go towards making sure those people can be put into areas where the economy does need growth, around things like intuition, creativity, understanding that LLMs aren't that great at doing.
I think we have a question over here.
Fantastic.
My question is regarding running LLMs on-prem, and how would you convince a company to run their own LLM, especially as regards for coding, because it's a metric that's kind of hard to quantify like the productivity boost that it gives developers, but developers just know when they are faster, but it's not something you can articulate. So how would you encourage a business to consider running a local LLM on Civo?
I've seen some fantastic customers who I think advocate for the code base. And actually, there's a lot of senior level people in businesses who would understand that you wouldn't put your business strategy in an LLM. You wouldn't put like your central customer records in an LLM. But if you're a technology company and your sole intellectual property is your code, and all of your valuation is based off that technical artifact, stick it in Claude. So I think it's just about having that conversation that actually company intellectual property in code is just as important as it is in documents. And that actually a lot of these SaaS providers now don't have guarantees that data won't be taken away. The other side of it, I would say, is cost. If you really believe that LLM augmented engineers will be more productive, and if you really do believe that in the future engineers will spend a lot of time using AI to increase their output, you want to invest in that now while it's cheap, easy to get into a company, and it will grow and expand as the models do. If you make an investment in, you can host your own. We have our turnkey products that would do the same. But if you make an investment in an LLM endpoint internally now, actually that can drive huge benefit in the long term, because these continuous model upgrades, you have longer ROI from owning that hardware for longer. And then I think in addition to that as well is you'll be at the forefront for those coding models. You'll be able to grab a hold of them and apply the value quicker. Which I think is a really good argument right now alongside security, is if you believe this stuff's here to stay, if you believe AI is going to change the way we do software engineering, why are we holding off and investing in it? It's a really good question. Cost saving. Yeah, I'd say cost saving and indemnity. If I was speaking to a CFO, I'd be like, it's 90% cheaper, and it reduces the risk of us having our IP leaked, of which you'd probably be able to get some kind of saving on your insurance. And those kind of languages talk. You can say, I write loads better code. But I think particularly with LLMs, they're such an economic model.
So unfortunately, we are out of time, but can we get a big round of applause for Josh, please?